So welcome everybody. We are doing grinds on a dime, and today we have extension agent Marielle Hampton, and she will be doing our cooking video for us today. I am Haley Cristobal, and I'm from Kauai County. Food safety check-in. Please wash your hands with soap if you are cooking with us tonight for at least 20 seconds. And we just want to make sure that you're doing that every time you're working with food or before you're eating, especially if you're going to run away and use the bathroom or play with your pets. We want to make sure that we are all following our food safety check-in. Today's recipes include pasta, one of my favorite foods, and I eat it a lot. So we have tortellini soup, we have broccoli mac and cheese, and we also have a Greek pasta salad that Marielle will be showing us how to cook tonight. I will be putting the ingredients in the chat as we move along, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna go ahead and unshare, and Marielle will be able to start going.
All right, thanks so much, Haley. Can you guys hear me okay? That's another thing. If you have any trouble hearing us throughout, please let us know so we can speak up. I saw a hand raised. Does that mean I need to speak up? All right, I'll be real loud and clear. Okay, so we're gonna get started today by making some broccoli mac and cheese. So if you're gonna be cooking along with us, first you need to make sure that you have a pot ready of your short pasta. I just use elbow macaroni because that's pretty classic, along with your broccoli already cooked. I used fresh broccoli today because that's what was available, but you can also use frozen. So all of this should be ready to go with our sauce on top. So that's what we're going to be cooking right now. All right, let's get this started. So what I'm going to do right now is to start off this cheese sauce for our broccoli mac and cheese. We're just going to melt a 1/4 cup of butter. This is going to be what we call a roux. That's spelled R-O-U-X. It's French. It's basically a mixture of flour and fat. So in this case, we're using butter and a 1/4 cup of flour. This is going to be providing the thickness and that creaminess that we really want to see in a mac and cheese. So this is melting real quick. Once it's melted and starting to sizzle a little bit, we'll add in our 1/4 cup of flour. Now, roux can have different colors. What we're making today is what we would call a white roux, so we're not going to cook it for very long. If you wanted to cook it for longer, it's going to start getting browner and getting more of a nuttier taste. But for this, all we really want to do is cook the flour for long enough that it loses that raw flour taste. And that will provide the thickening agent that will help to put all of this mac and cheese goodness together. All right, you can see some bubbles starting to form here. That means we're almost ready. And the key today for this broccoli mac and cheese is whisking. You're going to be whisking almost constantly to make sure that nothing is sticking to the bottom of your pan and especially not burning. We're working with a bunch of dairy, so we want to be sure that we're keeping it constantly moving so we're not burning it. All right. Looks like our butter's ready, so I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle in our flour and start whisking it quickly right away so we mix it all together. You can see how it kind of forms this smooth paste. And like I said, we're not going to cook this for very long. Really, for about a minute should be enough to get rid of that flour taste. And then we're going to be adding in our milk. So we're doing 3 cups of milk to make the base of this cheese sauce. I'm using reduced fat just because it's a little bit healthier, but you can do whatever makes sense for your family. If you guys love whole milk, that works too. I've never tried this, with a plant-based milk, but you certainly could give it a try. All right, it looks like we're already getting pretty cooked here. So I'm going to add my milk little by little, and I'm going to whisk the whole time I'm adding.
Just to add in while she's whisking along, you can use a plant-based milk, and you can also use a plant-based butter to make a roux. The only substitution that I wouldn't recommend is substituting the actual flour. I wouldn't use anything like almond flour or chickpea flour or oat flour, just because it won't have the same amount of gluten that will actually expand. But you can go ahead and use plant-based milk or a vegan butter if you are going that lifestyle.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Haley. That's a great tip. That's a great way to make this a little bit healthier if that's important to your family. So you'll see that I'm just adding the milk little by little so that it doesn't get clumpy, and whisking it to smooth. And basically we're going to get this all poured in and heated up, and we'll let it simmer for 4 or 5 minutes, just as long as it takes for it to thicken up. And it's pretty cool to see how quickly this roux is going to thicken up this milk. So a roux can be used to thicken a lot of things. You can make a lot of different creamy sauces this way. You can thicken up soups or stews or gravies with a roux. The possibilities are pretty endless. It's one of those things that sounds really fancy, but once you've made it once, you realize that it's totally doable. And for me, I don't really like cornstarch. It disagrees with my stomach. So this is a nice option for me when I want to thicken something up without having to use cornstarch or other starches. All right, we're gonna let this come up to heat. And the next thing that we'll be adding once this has thickened up is going to be our cheese. So we're going to be using about 2 cups of grated cheddar cheese. Personally, I like a really strong flavored cheese, so I'm going to be using sharp cheddar. I've found that about 8 ounces, one of those small blocks of cheddar cheese, is usually enough cheese for this, but if you want more, you can absolutely go for more. If you want to save a little time on this, you can always get the pre-grated stuff in a bag. It'll be a little bit more expensive, but sometimes that's going to make all the difference for having a quick meal, and you don't have to do the cleanup of washing that grater.
Hey, Marielle, we have a comment. They were wondering if you would mind lowering your host camera a little bit so they could see maybe the burner or that kind of stuff from the top view.
Like this?
Yeah, but then it would be a little bit, yeah, then we wouldn't see you. That's okay.
Okay, let's see. Well, we'll work on that next time. We'll see if we can get that arranged so you can see both.
Yeah, and you guys should be able to see both views on the spotlight right now. So what you would be seeing on your right side would be her with the stove and everything, and then her on the left would just be of her explaining.
Yeah, and if you are on a phone, it's not going to be able to necessarily show you both views at once. You might have to swipe to one side to see the other view if you aren't able to see both at once.
I'll put that in the chat as well.
Okay. Yeah, things are a little different when you're on a mobile device. All right, so this is getting a little hot. We're still not seeing any simmering action yet, but it's going to be pretty cool. So what I usually look for to see if my sauce has thickened up enough is I want to see a nice white coating on my whisk when I lift it up out of the mixture. So you can see it's still pretty thin. So we're going to keep mixing it. It's getting hotter now. And I think you can probably see it's definitely starting to thicken up already. It looks like it almost has cheese in it already. We're coming up to the most fun part of this process, which is adding in the grated cheese, because it melts beautifully into the sauce and it turns this great orange color. So if you've got kids, this one I think is a winner. It's hard to go wrong with mac and cheese. One thing that I like to note is that this homemade version of mac and cheese is better than the box version for a lot of reasons. Personally, I think it's cheaper. It makes a lot of food. It makes a really big batch of pasta that you should be able to feed 4 people with leftovers. And it also just gives you a little more control over the ingredients. So you know exactly what you're putting into it. There's not going to be any added stuff. So if you're concerned about health, this might be a better option for you than the stuff that comes from a box. You could use, like I said, a lower plant-based milk or a lower fat content milk, and do any other switches that might help to improve it a little much in terms of health. So you can see this is really thickening up. I think we're about ready to add our cheese. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my stovetop. Those of you, if you're cooking along with us at home, it might take you a little bit longer. I've got a really hot stove here, so it cooks pretty quickly. I'm going to go ahead and add in my cheese. Give that a quick stir. Ooh, look how creamy it is. This is my favorite part. Look how nicely that melts into that sauce. And if you have kids and you want to involve them in the cooking process, stirring ingredients in is always good. Of course, you have to monitor them to make sure they're not going to burn themselves on a hot pot, but this would be a really fun step for a kid to do and probably make them more likely to eat it afterward. All right, lovely smooth cheese sauce. Now we're just going to add one more thing, which is 2 teaspoons of mustard. I use Dijon mustard. You could use yellow mustard. If your family is not a fan of mustard, you could absolutely leave this out. Do a little bit less mustard, whatever you prefer. What's so great about this recipe is it's so customizable. You could add in more spices. If you wanted a little kick to it, you could add some paprika or crushed red pepper flakes. You could do some garlic powder in there. Lots of options, and you can find out what works for your family. All right, now we're ready to put it all together. So I'm going to pour my delicious creamy cheese sauce in. And we'll just give it a quick stir to mix that all together.
And while she's doing that, just a fun fact, because I'm full of fun facts. If you are vegan or vegetarian and you're not doing cheese, some substitutions that you could do is you could actually boil some potatoes and carrots. You can blend them up with a little bit of plant-based milk. And if you add in some salt, pepper, paprika, and some nutritional yeast, that's actually how they make mac and cheese without the cheese. So if you're going that route, there's definitely ways that you can make this. You can make it for a family, make it for yourself. And if you're going that route as well, it's really good the next day as well. I know that sometimes a lot of cheese dishes don't really hold over well, usually the next day, but if you are plant-based, it does really hold well over. So if you would like that recipe, you can go ahead and put it in the chat and we can send the recipe like that over. If you're open to trying new things in that route. But Marielle, that looks great.
Yeah, thanks so much for adding that. I personally love nutritional yeast, so I really like vegan mac and cheese. So like I said, super customizable. Because I've made this dish so many times for these cooking demonstrations, I've had a chance to try it with a lot of different things. If you love meat and you really want to include some meat, you can do a lot of different things. I've had chopped up salami in it. I've done it with Italian sausage. You could do some diced ham, things like that. I really love herbs, and so I like to do mine with some parsley on top. That's just my preference. But you can also add whatever kind of vegetables you want in there. If you want some color, like some diced red bell peppers would probably be nice. If you like tomatoes, I've done some cherry tomatoes in there. Whatever you and your family like to do to experiment and mix it up. And like Haley said, it really does well as leftovers. And so you can mix it up by adding all these different things into it if you want to change up that flavor profile. All right. Next, we're going to be doing some tortellini soup. How are you guys doing? Did anybody just make that broccoli mac and cheese with us? It's pretty decadent, I will tell you that. I would love to try the plant-based version because I think it would be
Sorry, I'm reading one of the comments. So if you're on the computer,
about 5 or 6 cloves because I love garlic, and so I just put a ton in whatever I'm cooking with garlic. You'll need
Maria, I think you were muted when you were first talking.
Oh, okay, sorry. So if you're gonna cook with us, we're gonna start with some minced garlic in about a tablespoon of hot oil. And if you've cooked before with garlic, you'll know that it's really important to make sure your garlic doesn't burn. So that's the most important step here. We're also going to be adding about 1 diced onion. And of course, the magic ingredient, some smoked sausage. So I personally love kielbasa, but what I'm doing today is some nice hot Portuguese sausage that I have sliced and then quartered because I like to get a little bit of sausage in every bite. So I like to cut mine pretty small. You could also just do it in slices if you prefer. Now for this, we're just gonna cook pretty much until these onions are translucent. That's usually the standard for when you're cooking with onions. We could also get a little bit of color on these Portuguese sausage so they get a little bit of browning action happening, and that'll just enhance their flavor that much more. So the rest of this, once this is cooked, is gonna come together really fast. We're going to be adding about 5 cups of chicken stock. I just have 1 carton here. If you don't have chicken stock in your kitchen, you can absolutely just use a bouillon cube and then add about 5 cups of water. I do that all the time. I don't typically keep chicken stock on hand. So that's something that I really turn to a lot when I'm trying to throw something together quickly. And of course, a can of diced tomatoes. You can also use crushed tomatoes if that's what you have on hand. You can use fresh tomatoes if you have those. Just some kind of tomatoes are great with this. We're also going to be adding a little bit of dried oregano, which is going to add some nice Italian style seasoning. And then some kidney beans from a can and tortellini. And then at the end, we'll be throwing in some spinach. You can use either frozen or fresh. So this is a really versatile meal. You can really add whatever vegetables you have on hand that kind of go with the flavor profile. You could absolutely do some bell peppers if you have those on hand. You could do a little bit of a bag of mixed frozen vegetables if you've got that. You know, it's a soup, so it's very flexible in that way. You also could skip on the tortellini and make this more of a pasta fagioli, I believe is what it's called, and you could just substitute a short pasta for the tortellini. It's not going to be the same, but it'll absolutely be delicious. And that's the nice thing that you can throw together, usually with stuff you have on hand in your house. All right, so we're getting this looking pretty good. So I think we're ready to add our liquid.
And while Marielle is adding in her liquid, if you also don't keep chicken broth on hand, another option is that you could use better than bouillon. If you're watching your sodium and you're watching your health a little bit more, better than bouillon is actually healthier than those little cubes, and it has a lot more richer flavor. You can add more water to less of that. And they also have just recently started selling it at Costco. So if you're a Costco shopper, that's one of those things that I definitely have on my Costco list. And I believe it's about $6 a jar. But for me, a jar can last anywhere from a few months to a year. So that's just another tip.
That's a great suggestion, because even though bouillon cubes are a great shortcut, they do have a lot of sodium in them. And so if that's something that you're trying to be careful of, like Haley said, something like better than bouillon might be a good option instead of that. And of course, I used unsalted chicken stock that I added to this because that would let you control how much salt you're adding. So that's the benefit of all of these. For example, that mac and cheese, it's definitely going to need some salt and pepper. But having the control to add that even to each individual portion is going to give you a lot more control, and you're going to end up consuming a lot less sodium than you would have if you had just gone with something that was processed and prepackaged. All right, so I added in that chicken stock. That's going to get a little hotter. I'm going to add in my diced tomatoes. And this is basically going to be coming to a boil. And then we're going to be adding in our pasta, our tortellini, and letting that simmer until it's pretty much ready. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my dried herbs. So I've got 2 teaspoons here of dried oregano. I'll add that in. So dried herbs are not going to be necessarily as pungent as fresh herbs, and they're going to need a little more time to simmer in a sauce like this for the flavor to really fully come out. So that's why we're going to add that early on. So while that pasta is simmering, that oregano will have a chance to bloom those flavors a little bit more. All right. The other thing I'm going to add in is a can of drained and rinsed kidney beans. I go with the dark red because I love the color of that, but you can do a light red kidney bean. You could also substitute other kinds of beans if you have those. I think a white bean would be fine in this, like a cannellini bean. You could probably even throw in chickpeas. It's a very forgiving recipe in that way. All right, any questions while we wait for this to come to a boil? All right, just a quick little tip here. So you'll see I have everything measured out and ready to go into my meal that I'm making. That's so it's easier for me to do a demonstration, but that's also a great strategy for cooking in general. It's called mise en place. And so chefs will do that a lot when they're cooking. So you have everything just ready to go in whenever. So you're not necessarily scrambling around to measure out an ingredient. You already have everything ready to go. And it makes the cooking process a lot more fun, enjoyable, and less frantic if you have the time to prep all of your ingredients in advance like that. With that said, I know we are all very busy and have families, and sometimes you just got to be cooking on the fly and chopping things up as you're going, and that works too. Like this, you absolutely could have just diced up your onion, gotten that going, then done your garlic, throw that in, then done your Portuguese sausage, throw that in. There are some things that require things pre-measured, like that roux with the mac and cheese, but this one is a lot more forgiving. All right, it looks like we're about to start simmering here, so I'm going to get my tortellini ready. So the tortellini is going to be the most expensive part of this meal. I just used one of these bags. It's 8 ounces of dried tortellini. It takes a longer time to cook, but it's cheap. One bag is about $5 at our local grocery store. If you do want to try and do something faster, you can always go for fresh or frozen tortellini, but those are just going to be pricier. So for me, I like the option of keeping on hand a couple bags of these dried tortellini that I can throw into a soup whenever I need to put something together really quickly. And then otherwise, the whole dish, I think, comes together for less than $20, which is really nice, especially if you can get some of your canned goods on sale. The only thing that is really fresh in this is your onion, garlic, and that Portuguese sausage. The rest of it you can pretty much keep on hand in your pantry and have ready to go for a night when you don't know what to cook but don't want to spend the money on takeout. All right, we're getting some boiling action going here, so I'm going to go ahead and add in my tortellini. Like I said, this is going to take a little bit of time to cook. So I have found it ends up taking maybe about 15 minutes. The nice thing is, though, you really just have to do this first part and then you throw in the tortellini and you can walk away for a while. So for me, I've got a baby at home, so I like this because I can take 5 or 10 minutes to put everything together in the beginning, and then I can just throw in my tortellini, walk away for 15 minutes, give it a stir every once in a while, and by the time I'm done feeding my baby, I can come back and have this delicious tortellini soup pretty much ready to go for me to eat. All right, any questions? All right, I'm just gonna set this aside while I get ready to do our third recipe, and we'll come back to this after we finish our third recipe. All right, so for our third recipe of the day, we're going to be doing a Greek pasta salad. Now, this one is nice because you can just cook your pasta earlier in the day and throw it in the fridge, and then throw everything else together at the end of the night if you want to, which is really nice. You could use it with extra pasta that you have lying around if you've made something and ended up with extra leftover pasta. And it's great because it can be eaten cold. It's a nice side. It's nice as leftovers. And so it's pretty versatile. And you can add in lots of different things depending on your family's taste. So I started with about 1 pound of cooked pasta. This is rotini. You can use any other kind of short pasta as well. So elbows would work. You could do bow ties, things like that. You wouldn't want to do a long pasta for obvious reasons you'll see as we throw this together. So first thing that I'm going to add in is going to be 1 large cucumber diced. So this is actually a local English cucumber from down the road at Hawaii Farming LLC. They grow these cucumbers. And then we're going to want a little bit of protein in our salad. So I'm going to throw in 1 can of drained chickpeas. If you want to add more meat or a little more protein, you can always try some different options like salami would, diced salami would be good in this. You could try some other options as well. Then I also have about 1 can of sliced black olives. Now I just went with a can of medium black olives because it was cheap. If you don't want to slice them, you could just get the small ones, and those are fine in terms of being nice and bite-sized to add to the salad. I also have 1 pint of cherry tomatoes, and these have been quartered again, so they're nice and bite-sized. As you can see, you want to be making this in a very large pot because you're going to need space for all the ingredients as well as some space to toss it all together at the end. All right, almost done. We're going to add some red onion. The recipe calls for about half of a red onion diced. You could add more or less depending on what you prefer. But that adds a nice little bite and some sort of acidity to the whole thing. And now the most expensive part of this recipe is going to be your feta cheese. So it's up to you if you want to stick with feta cheese, or you could also try some other cheeses like provolone. Personally, I think it's just not the same without feta cheese. So I was lucky enough to get this on sale. And I will use about a cup of crumbled feta cheese.
Another good cheese, if you're not a feta fan, is actually pepper jack is a good one. You could just get a block and cube that up because it'll still give you that little hint of spice, but at the same time, sometimes it is more cost effective. And if you're not a feta fan, another thing too is goat cheese is actually another good one. But yeah, looks great.
That's a great idea. Actually, I think goat cheese would probably be really good in this. But I just love feta cheese. I love the combination, especially of the cucumber and the feta cheese. So for me, it's kind of a no-brainer. But luckily, everything else is pretty affordable in this, so I don't mind spending a little bit of money on the feta cheese. So these I got on sale. It's about 4 ounces for, it was $3. But it's always good to have other options in mind. All right, so that is our salad. We're gonna need a dressing for it now. So if you are, in a pinch and you just wanna use some Italian dressing that you already have in your fridge, that's totally fine. But I'm just gonna show you how to make a really fast dressing that we can use for this. Sorry. And if you haven't made a salad dressing before, I would really recommend giving it a try because it's so simple and you can really customize it to your tastes. And it really makes a difference between just kind of bland, blah vegetables or a pasta salad and something that's really vibrant and flavorful. So I'm going to start with a third of a cup of olive oil. I personally just make my salad dressings in one of these little mason jars with a screw-on lid. It has to be screw-on tightly because you're going to be shaking it, so you don't want it to go everywhere. But this makes it easier for you to eventually learn to eyeball your ingredients. You can figure out, okay, I usually will do oil to about here, vinegar to about here, and maybe like a tablespoon or so of mustard or something like that. So so you can throw together a salad dressing really quick. So to my olive oil, I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of red wine vinegar. Now, like I said, this is a dressing for this Greek pasta salad, but it's very versatile. You could absolutely do a different kind of vinegar if, for example, all you have is apple cider vinegar, or you could even go a little crazy and try balsamic vinegar to make an interesting vinaigrette for a pasta salad. And then we're just going to add a little bit of dried herbs and spices. So I have here a teaspoon of dried oregano and a 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder.
This is also a good, this vinaigrette is also a good marinade if you want to marinate some chicken or do something like that. It may be good just to make in bulk, maybe for the week, and have some for pasta salad, have some for a green salad, and have some to marinate either some chicken, some shrimp, some fish. So that's a really good meal prep strategy as well.
Yes, awesome, awesome tip. Salad dressings are super versatile in that way, and they can really help to change things up. And you'll be surprised how much you want to eat a salad when you've already got a dressing that you've made from scratch in the fridge. All right, I'm just going to add a little bit of salt and pepper to bring this vinaigrette home. Always got to have the fresh cracked black pepper. Come from a family of foodies. And then I just screw on the top and shake it all up. There you go, salad dressing. So you can either dress this pasta salad right away and stick it in the fridge and it'll keep for a while. Or if you're like me, I actually prefer to have my dressing separate so I can add it as I would like later on. So I would serve myself some of this and then add my dressing on top. So let's see how it looks. This is a great thing to cook for guests if you like as well, because it's always a winner. People love Greek pasta salad. The colors are so beautiful. You have the red of the tomatoes, the black olives, green cucumbers, and the the purple red onion there. And what I always like to do is add a little bit of garnish to really up the wow factor. And I think sometimes kids can appreciate that too. So for this, I'm going to garnish it with some fresh oregano from my garden. And if you haven't grown oregano before, I really recommend it. It's very easy to grow here. All right, there you have it. Some Greek pasta salad. So that one, a lot of the work is really just chopping up those ingredients. You see that really putting it together is as simple as throwing everything into your pasta. All right, any questions? Okay. So we're just going to come back to our tortellini soup. And as you can see, we're making some progress here with the tortellini, but it's going to need a few more minutes. So you can see that clearly if we had started with fresh or frozen tortellini, this would already be ready to go. But that's okay. We have a little bit of time here. So whenever my tortellini is pretty much ready to eat, I would really recommend for the dried tortellini that you taste test it first. You're going to want to see that the inside with the cheese is nice and creamy, and that the pasta outside of the tortellini is fully cooked through. And that'll be a sign that you're pretty much almost ready to eat. If you find that as this tortellini is cooking, that you're needing a little bit more liquid to cover it up, if it's boiling away all the liquid, you can always just add in a little bit of water here and there to keep that pasta cooking up. All right, while that's going, I'll just season it with some salt and pepper. And here's a fun story, actually. So tortellini soup has a really special place in my heart because when I was growing up, we had this dish that my mother would make that we called Mama's Soup Surprise. So it was based on this children's song that we always used to listen to, where we would describe this special soup that was made with all of these gross animal parts. And you know, when you're a kid, you just love thinking about things being gross or weird, like green eggs and ham. And so it was saying, oh, there are things like chicken lips and lizard hips. And they called the song Mama's Soup Surprise, and about all of these funny ingredients in the soup. So my parents, being brilliant, decided to call their tortellini soup Mama's Soup Surprise. And everything in the soup was one of those weird things from the song. So, you know, the tortellini would be the chicken lips, and the kidney beans would be the lizard hips. And that just made us love to eat it as kids. And sometimes that's a great tip if you've got kids at home. Calling things by funny names is a nice way to get them to eat things that they might not necessarily want to try. Like with that broccoli mac and cheese, you might try calling your broccoli some little trees, or have them, if you're really desperate to get them to eat broccoli, you might have them use their little toy dinosaurs to have them walk through the forest of the broccoli, and encourage them to play with their food a little bit more so that they're more likely to eat it. All right, so we're getting to the point where I think these tortellini are almost ready.
We do have a few questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
First question is, what kind of salt are you using?
Okay, well, I was afraid you'd ask that. I am using a very fancy, expensive salt called Malden sea salt flakes. You do not need to use this. I'm just using it because it's an open box, and so it's easy for me to take pinches and sprinkle it over my food. But this is much more of like a fancy finishing salt that you would say sprinkle over the top of a finished dish you were serving to guests. All of these things can be salted with regular salt. But this one is special. It comes in these kind of large flakes. But sort of a pro tip, if you do like to cook a lot, I think that almost every chef I know adds their salt by hand. You know, you can always measure out salt, and some recipes will call for certain amounts of salt, but you will learn your own preferences, and, you know, doing a sprinkle of salt with your fingers sometimes is a really nice touch. And it helps distribute that salt a lot better rather than just dumping a spoonful of salt in the middle.
Perfect. And the next question was, could you use beef broth instead of chicken broth?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I bet that would be really good. You know, it just has to go with the rest of the flavors, which is pork, cheese, and beans. And so I think a beef broth would probably be fine. It might be a little stronger flavored than a chicken broth. I would probably opt for a vegetable broth before a beef broth, but I have a feeling that it would be fine. Haley, do you have any thoughts?
I just said that you could use any kind of broth. I would probably use anything besides like a seafood broth.
Yeah, yeah.
But fun question, you guys can put it in the chat. How many of you make your own broth at home? That's kind of a chefy thing, but we'll see. And you can go ahead and put that in the chat. You can say yes, you can say no, you can say you need a recipe, you can say you've never tried it, maybe you want to learn how to make it. Maybe we'll do a little shout out one time and show you how to do it. But we just want to learn as much as we can so we can make the class better every single time. But yeah, go ahead and put that in the chat.
Yeah, you know, making broth is one of those things that you might not always have time to do, but it's a great way to cut down on your food waste. One thing you can do is just keep either a Ziploc bag or a Tupperware in your freezer that's just designated for food scraps to make broth. So you can throw so many things in there. You could put corn cobs, you could put onion skins, the ends of celery, the ends of carrots. Lots of things are going to add great flavor if you make a homemade broth. And it's really going to bring a soup like this to the next level if you have the time and inclination to try making your own broth sometime. So yeah, if anybody is interested in learning how to do that, let us know and we could always throw that in.
Great. So we see some people that say they never have made it. We see some people that say that they do occasionally and some people that do make it. That's really interesting. I started making my own chicken stock when I got my first Instapot, which was a while ago. Marielle knows I have 5 of them now. But yeah, I actually take a lot of my, like I'll go to Costco and I'll usually buy a rotisserie chicken, or I'll buy 2 or 3 or whatever. And then I like to freeze the rotisserie chickens. And then I kind of just pick from them and then I keep those bones and I keep all my kitchen scraps, and I like to make a lot of broths. Because I'm a very soupy person. Like I like to have soup, I like to have stews, I like to have roast, I like to have fresh gravy all the time. So when you have all of those items, you can make something that's, like Marielle said, 100 times richer in flavor, and it does take it to that next level. But yeah, I see that maybe a few people want us to try and do that, and maybe we'll have a separate class or a separate series on maybe back to basics. I think that would be a really cool series. But yeah.
Thanks, Haley. Yeah, actually, one of the times I actually do like to make my own stock is when I have eaten some awesome rotisserie chicken, and I would really like to capture the flavor of that. So I love making broth with my leftover rotisserie chicken carcasses. All right, well, we're coming to the end of our time here. So as you can see, my soup is done. My tortellini is cooked through. I probably would add a little bit more liquid to this because I really like having a more soupy soup. But in the interest of time, we're just gonna finish this up for you guys. So I like to finish with some spinach. Usually I will use frozen spinach, but they didn't have it at the store this time. So I just went ahead and bought a big bag of local fresh spinach. And we'll mix that in, and pretty much once that's all wilted, you're going to be ready to go. I'm just gonna go ahead and show you what the finished product looks like. So I would recommend, if you do have some fresh herbs around, that's a great thing to add to your finished product. Like I said, I grow some herbs in my garden, so basil is a really nice one to add into this. And I would recommend serving it with a little bit of grated Parmesan cheese if you have that, but it definitely doesn't need it. It's a very flavorful soup if you just want to go ahead and eat it as is. So there you have it. We've got our pasta salad, our broccoli mac and cheese, and tortellini soup all coming together in about an hour. The cost of ingredients for these 3 meals, which would each feed probably a family of 4, came in at under $75, so very affordable. The most time-consuming part of each of them is just cooking the pasta. So if you can throw in a pot of water on to boil on your stove, I even will cheat and use my electric kettle to start boiling my water quicker before I boil a pot of pasta, you're halfway to dinner already. So that just about sums it up. If we have time for a few more questions, if anybody's got them. Otherwise, I'm going to start eating.